And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a card game. We're going to take a look at Florenza, the card game. Now, this is a card game from Placentia Games for 2 to 4 players, and it's going to be about managing your hand of cards and playing cards out to the table in order to hopefully score points by generating resources, which are also cards, and spending those cards in order to buy even more cards. So real quick, why don't we open up this box, we'll see how the game plays, and then we'll come back here at the end and we'll get my opinions on Florenza. So here you can see the components for Florenza. Now, I've set this up for a 2-player game. Although it does go up to 4, the changes are going to be very minimal for for different player games. So the only changes is that there's going to be more of these artists out if there's more players, and there's a few cards that aren't in a couple of the decks. There's a couple extra actions that'll be available in the form of these cards out here, and there's some more cards that would go into these different Florenza card decks that you'll be drawing cards from at the start of each turn. Aside from that, there's no changes to gameplay. So, each player is going to have a hand of cards to start this game. You'll see in this hand of cards, they're going to have many different types of cards. First, they have 5 Florenza cards. These are going to be the cards you're trying to play to the table throughout the game. So you'll see they have different colors. This one is yellow, and it's going to increase your income by a gold at the start of each of your turns, but it's going to cost you a metal and a stone to play it to the table if you decide to take that action. This one is a guild. It costs you a wood and a gold and some money, but it's going to give you 3 points at the end of the game for each one of these guilds that you've built. We have a purple card here, which is a residence. These are special. They actually give you an extra action at a certain point in the game. You'll see that later. And they're also going to give you some income. In this case, it's going to let you draw an extra card, and it's going to give you some money at the start of each round. And each of these cards will have its own type of benefits. We see a gray card here, which is simply worth victory points at the end of the game. In addition to our Florenza cards, we have some money to start the game, 300 of it, and then we have one of every resource that's available in the game. And you'll see these are all in the form of cards. So you're often managing a very large hand of cards from turn to turn. Everybody's going to get their cards at the start of the game, and usually we'd be setting up this board here. We'd lay out these different types of buildings that you can build that are all worth victory points but have very high costs. And they're arranged in an order so that you can read them. This one's worth 14. This 8 should be next to these 9s, actually. And then they're going to go down 14, 9, 9, 8, 8, 7, 7. And you always keep them in this order. They'll change from round to round. Some of them will go away. The most expensive will stay. So they should get progressively more and more expensive, but more and more valuable as the game goes on. We'd also lay out these artists, and these will change completely from round to round. On the back of these artists at the top, you can see victory point potential values. This one's 2, 2, 2, or 3. There's 4 of them in the deck, and those will be the values of this artist. So if you're lucky and you buy him, he could be worth 3. You'd look at the other side once you did pay for him, and turns out he is worth 3. So that's the most valuable of that card in the deck. Whereas some, this one you know he's worth 1, but he's cheaper. And the cost to buy these guys I'll cover in a little bit. So we'd lay all of this out, we'd make sure that all of our actions are face up, and then we would proceed with the round, and the first player would take the first action. So, we have the first player here, and he's got this marker to keep track of actions 1, 2, 3, and 4, which all players will get in the round. And you'll see that this thing keeps track of it as it goes on. And once you've done 4 actions, there are some special actions. The players that have built the Palagio, the Casamento, the Casa, and then whoever has the Predictor, or if anybody has a Predictor, will get to take those bonus actions that they offer, which is simply additional actions on the turn. What actions, you might ask? Well, that's a good question. And there's a little handy card here. There's 8 different actions you can take, but they're all pretty straightforward. We'll cover them all real briefly. So, the 8 actions you can take are that you may play a Florenza card from your hand. Those are the cards that I showed you at the beginning, these ones here with the costs along the left-hand side. In order to play them, you're going to have to pay the resources on the left-hand side in the form of different cards or money, and then play it to the table in front of you, adding it to your tableau. Some of those, like the Casamento here, will give you additional actions and income, some will give you victory points, and some will give you endgame scoring conditions. Instead of doing that on your turn, you can complete one of the monuments, and that's these cards up here that I showed you. They're laid out much like the Florenza cards, except for that they're much more expensive usually. 2 stone, 1 wood, 2 metal, 2 some type of food or vegetable, 200 money, and you must buy an artist, either a green or a blue artist. When you buy these, you're going to be buying them from this row down here, or you can always take the anonymous artist that has a much lower cost but is worth no victory points, and you would flip him over to show that he's been used. When you buy these, you pay the money indicated on them, and you take them, and you get the number of victory points at the end of the game indicated on the back of the card. It's a little bit of a gamble, depending on which one you buy, but you could get a significant number of victory points. Instead of buying something or building something from your hand, you can decide to reserve these buildings. What you would do is take one of them from the supply, put it into your own area reserved face down, and essentially keep it till later. Now this is risky because if you don't finish it by the end of the game, you lose victory points equal to the value on the card. So if I took this, reserved it, and didn't use it, I would lose 9 victory points at the end of the game. The same is true for these artists. You can reserve them, they stay this way until you decide to use it on a later turn to build something. And then if you don't use them, they're going to be worth negative points that are on the other side. You can take as many as you want, hold on to them into your reserve, but make sure to use them before the end of the game. You may also activate any of these location cards as your action. So there's several out here. Most of them do the same type of thing. These 6, for example, all let you flip them over to take a resource, whatever resource is shown on them. For example, this one is the food vegetable type of resource. Could flip that over and take one of those, adding it to my hand. The ones beneath them allow you to sell resources from your hand. For example, the one right below that lets you sell one of the vegetables for $200 back to the supply. So if I need money to buy something else, be one of these monuments at the top or to pay for one of the Florenza cards from my hand, I can flip that face down and get some money, and then on a later action, go ahead and play my card. The ones over here are going to let you swap resources. You can see there's one right here. Lets you swap one resource for any other resource from the supply. Or the one beneath it will let you take the first player card, which can be sometimes important, although in the 2-player game is kind of a waste because most of the time it's going to rotate to you anyway on the next turn. So in 2-player, this action is not so important, but in more player games it can be. So those are the main actions, but there's still a couple other ones. You can send out workers. Sending out workers simply gets you $50. So you can send out workers. Basically, it's a passing action, and you take $50 from the supply. You may go to the market, which allows you to buy a resource for 100, sell a resource for 100, or trade 2 resources for any 1 resource that you need from the supply. And finally, you can search for inspiration. Searching for inspiration will allow you to draw 1 card from the Florenza card deck and put it into your hand. So maybe it'll get you something that you'd like to build on one of your future actions. Anyhow, each player is going to take 1 action, then each player will take a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th action, with the start player keeping track of that on their marker here. After that, players who have built the Pelagio will get to take their extra action, then players who have built the Casamento, then the Casa, and then whoever has a Predictore, which is a brown card. It looks like this right here. That shows you on there that it gets you 1 extra action at the end of the round. After everyone has done this, you're going to go on to the end of round stage, which is going to be discarding cards. In your hand, you're only allowed to carry over 1 of your Florenza cards, which you start the round with 5, or start the first round with 5. You can only carry 1 over. So if you haven't played them all, you must decide which one you'd like to keep, discarding the rest. After this, you're going to go ahead and collect income, and your income is shown on your family card that you get to show which family you are. You're going to get a base income of $200, 1 stone, and 1 wood. Then, if you're the first player, you get to choose 1 extra resource that everyone else gets, and then there are other cards that provide you with additional resources at the start of your round. So it could be more vegetables, or more stone, or even additional money, or an extra card draw. So you're going to have to collect your income, which could or may not be different from everyone else's. Finally, you're going to go and decide who's the first player. If anybody had taken this card, they are going to be the new first player. If no one had, it's going to pass to the left, and that player is going to become the new first player. Finally, you're going to reset all of the location cards, flipping these face up, and then you're going to start a new round. Each player will get 4 cards, plus any additional that they're supposed to get from the Florenza deck. But this first deck, there's 1, will mix with deck 2, and you'll start with new cards to be added to be drawn from this deck. In the next round, it will mix with deck 3, and then the discard in the 4th round will get shuffled in, and you'll have another deck with kind of the discarded cards that people didn't want earlier. In the last round, you're just going to play with what's left, and the game will go on for 5 rounds. Players will get new cards, players will readjust these monuments out on the table, continue taking actions, and try and build up to get the most victory points. Whoever best manages to use all of their cards, the actions on the table, and reserve cards to be used later will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Florenza from Placentia Games for 2 to 4 players. It plays pretty quickly. I'd say it probably took us 45 minutes to play the game on average. The game is pretty easy to learn. I would say that it doesn't really have a whole lot going on, however. You're looking at a game where it's going to kind of feel samey after several games here, and that's probably my major complaint, is that based on the cards that are in the deck, and those aren't really going to change a whole lot, and based on the cards that you get, you're going to kind of be steered towards a particular type of strategy. Now, yes, you always have the choices as to what cards you want to play and which cards you want to carry over, which resources you'd like to generate from those central actions, but I think the fact that the cards don't change at all, and maybe this is something we've gotten spoiled with the deck builder genre, with cards always changing, but the fact that the cards don't change at all, we'll kind of see this game play out over several series of plays. So I did find it interesting. I didn't find it to be anything spectacular. All of the ideas in this game have been done before. This does them a little bit differently, but you are managing this gigantic hand of cards at times. You have tons of resources. You're drawing cards at the start of your turn. You have cards you're trying to play, cards that you're trying to buy, and it's just a lot to manage, especially when you consider all of the cards that are out on the table as well. So nothing new. I think it's going to play itself out. A lot of cards to handle in your hand. It's just got several things that I'm not super psyched about. So I do think it's an okay game. I think it's one that certain types of players are going to like to check out. If you like a relatively simple card game that doesn't have a lot of different types of bits that you have to manage, this one's probably going to be one that you'd like to see. But overall, just not one that I think is going to last in my collection, and not one that really sparked my interest all that much. So if it sounds good to you, check it out anyway. That is Florenza, the card game.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.